Let's bring in NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Reilly. Blanche, addressing a lot of topics beyond the Epstein files, including, as Garrett just mentioned, the arrest of journalist Don Lemon. To recap this situation, he was basically arrested in connection with a protest. Some protesters in Minnesota went into a church earlier this month. Lemon was broadcasting that, speaking with people who were involved with it. Now he and 3 others, including another independent journalist, have been taken into custody. Ryan, what are we learning about this?
Yeah, so it was interesting to see the Deputy Attorney General's reaction to that. He said, you know, what are you looking for me to do? Jump up and down when talking about Don Lemon's arrest. Here's what we know about the arrest of Don Lemon, to be clear. The documents in this individual case have not come out yet, so we haven't seen an indictment, which is the likely situation that we're looking at here when that document eventually comes out. But what we do know is that when the Justice Department presented this previously to a federal magistrate judge, presented this case in connection with this protest, that the federal judge found that they had no probable cause, which is the lower barrier to get past that initial charging stage, to charge Don Lemon. There were individuals who were a part of this group who he did allow those cases to move forward. But the statute here is really unique. The statute that we're talking about is the FACE Act. And the FACE Act was passed in the wake of the murder of numerous abortion doctors in the 1990s. And in 1994, they passed this legislation that mostly focused on those abortion clinics. But as a matter of compromise, they also added in churches here. Now, historically, they've never used the FACE Act in this way before. They've just never brought cases against individuals who protested at a church. And obviously, there are just basic distinctions between how a church would operate, which is generally open, welcomes in members of the public, versus a medical facility, such as an abortion clinic. So there are just a lot of questions about what will ultimately happen with this case. And we know that because a federal judge sort of flagged those red questions by taking the very rare step of rejecting an affidavit from the federal government saying that they should arrest someone, just finding that there was not a basis to conduct those arrests. And alongside with Don Lemon, there are other protesters who have been charged under this really unprecedented use of the FACE Act. And so ultimately, how that plays out will be determined, going forward in the future once that gets before a judge and once that gets before potentially jurors at some point.
Yeah, and Don Lemon's attorney is Abby Lowell, who did put out a statement saying instead of investigating the federal agents who killed 2 peaceful Minnesota protesters, the Trump Justice Department is devoting its time, attention, and resources to this arrest, and that is the real indictment of wrongdoing in this case. He added, this unprecedented attack on the First Amendment and transparent attempt to distract attention from the many crises facing this administration will not stand. Don will fight these charges rigorously and thoroughly in court. Ryan, to the best of our knowledge, Don Lemon was arrested last night in Los Angeles because he was apparently there covering the Grammys. I know we don't even have this unsealed yet, so we don't know all the details, but what would we expect to happen next?
That's a really great question, because in the other cases of the original, what were to be co-defendants of Don Lemon, the Justice Department moved to hold them in custody until trial, which judges uniformly rejected against all 3 of those individuals that the Justice Department sought to have locked up until trial, which is a really I'd say bold move, because, what they argued was that this was a crime of violence, and the judge came back in 2 of those cases and said there's no evidence that this was a crime of violence, and shot down the Justice Department's proclamations there. And so they've really struggled with this case in Minnesota. But obviously how this plays out in the future is to be determined. But there is a non-zero chance that the Justice Department could move to hold Don Lemon in custody until trial, given the fact that his would-be co-defendants, they moved to try to detain them, even though that was rejected by a judge. So we don't know when this initial court appearance will take place. And obviously, Don Lemon can't speak for himself right now. He has to speak through lawyers, if he can even contact them, because he remains in federal custody.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or watch live on our YouTube channel.